To our top story. Sir Keir Starmer's accused Rishi Sunak of hiding in Downing Street, squatting in Downing Street, in fact, using a major speech to launch an attack on the Tory party.
Hold on to the flickering hope in your heart that things can be better, because they can. You can choose it. You can choose the hope of national renewal, the responsibility of service, what politics can and should be. And you can reject the pointless populist gestures, the low-road cynicism that the Tories believe is all you deserve.
Well, this came as the Prime Minister announced he was planning an election for the second half of the year, claiming he had lots of work to do between now and then.
Well, let's look at this in more detail. Joining us now is the former Labour official, Richard Said. Thank you so much. And also former Downing Street Director of Communications, Jonathan Haslam. Jonathan, good morning to you too. Jonathan, it was quite a well-timed announcement from Rishi Sunak because Keir Starmer's there, ready to lay out his pitch to the public, and Sunak sort of steals the headlines by saying, OK, I'll flirt with you a little bit and tell you when the election's going to come.
Good morning, Rosie, and thank you for that. Yes, it was quite a very judicious piece of politics from Rishi Sunak. There's a bit of a tradition where you have prime ministers and leaders of parties making their New Year's speech. This one from Sunak was not a speech. He was out in the countryside making a question and answer session with various people, and a very carefully dropped in piece of information which has taken him to the top of the headlines and really knocked Keir Starmer off them. So smart politics, not entirely ruling out the possibility of a May election to coincide with the local elections, but avoiding that problem that Gordon Brown had some years ago, when in the autumn of a year he could have gone to the country, and he then decided at the last minute, after an awful lot of talk from the politicians around him, that he was going to pull back. And that led to accusations of dithering. Now, here we've got accusations, as you would normally expect from the opposition, of squatting in Downing Street, bring it on. And we're left with this delicious idea now of what is the timing for the election? Because it does get a little bit confusing later on in the year. You have party conference season in September. And I just wonder, maybe he would want to go, Sunak, on October the 19th, which is just 2 days and 5 years after Boris Johnson went to the country. And of course, Boris Johnson really wanted to go to the country.
Well, it's an intriguing proposition. And actually, the wording was very careful. He said his working assumption, Richard, his working assumption was he was going to call it in the second half of the year. So that actually leaves it wide open. What it does do, I think, is it sort of quashes those people who said it was going to be held at the same time as the local elections. There was a talk of a super election. But just let's look at what Keir Starmer said. He talked about Project Hope, this downtrodden UK. He promises renewal of Britain. Was it exciting?
Of course it was. I mean, I'm not entirely sure about what Jonathan said about, Rishi Sunak having won the battle of the headlines yesterday. I mean, everyone thinks he bottled it, right? I'm not sure that's really what you want at the top of the headlines. I think if you go and ask people, are you desperate for a general election campaign? No. But would you like a chance to get rid of the Tories? Yes, they would. And this is actually kind of a problem, a fundamental problem with our political system, right? We've got a Prime Minister who, I mean, of course he's unelected. They're all unelected. But he hasn't come in on a manifesto. The 2019 manifesto, levelling up. Maybe they never really meant it seriously, but, it's gone nowhere, has it?
Talking about a manifesto, Richard, I think what we want to know is what's in the Labour Party manifesto? We've got a lot of kind of, oh, I feel this. If you want hope, come to us. But what are the policies?
28 billion a year to achieve a great British energy company.
No, but the Labour Party,
which they are rowing back on, possibly, depending on the economy?
Depending on the fiscal limits, which they always said would be primary.
Right.
It's caution, though, isn't it? That's what we hear. And, Jonathan, from your perspective, it's easy to criticise the Conservatives because, we know exactly... We're all living through exactly the decisions that they've made. Sunak is trying to buy time. He's bought a little bit, but surely not enough.
Well, hope springs eternal. If you look at the 5 pledges, which actually he made about a year ago during a New Year's speech, which probably inclined him not to make another one this year. Of the 5 pledges he made, he's only got one that he can talk up, and that's inflation. And that is essentially, of course, the job of the Bank of England. And to the extent the government's done anything about getting inflation down, it may be by putting taxes up through what's called fiscal drag. So, he's got a long way to go, and he does want more time. I mean, the economic outlook isn't that encouraging, but it could turn around. Interest rates, certainly in the marketplace, are falling rather more quickly than people imagined. So most of the electorate, aside from us and Richard in the studio there, are talking about politics all the time. Most normal people get on with their lives, and when there's an election, then they focus. And certainly the polls show there are quite a lot of people who really haven't made up their minds at the moment. They're voters who will be taking a decision on the day when they put their ballots through the boxes. So there's lots for Sunak to go for. He wants to buy more time. And as for Labour, they are, of course, extremely cautious. And one of our papers is talking today about how they were looking at trying to stop retroactive fee paying, and the possibility that for private schools they'll impose VAT, which has been spoken of quite a lot.
Jonathan, is there concern? This is maybe a bit of a vanity project from the Prime Minister to say, I want to be in place for 2 years.
Well, why not? I mean, you only get a limited number of occasions to be, or opportunities to be Prime Minister, and 2 years is good. That puts you in the record books. But he will be a good Tory, and he'll want to see if he can give them the best possible chance after 2 chaotic, to put it mildly, Prime Ministerships, and coming off the back of COVID and coming out of all the issues we've seen from the dreadful war in Ukraine.
Let's put that to Richard. Richard, I think what Jonathan was saying was actually the lead, although it is convincing currently, I think is soft. We're seeing changes and fluxes in the poll. The Labour lead isn't as strong as it was before Christmas, for example. The question is, what does the Labour Party have to do here? Jonathan was sort of saying it's all about being cautious, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But I do think Rosie's right. People want to know, what does the Labour Party actually stand for going forward? Why should people vote for Labour?
Well, this is the thing, right? You ask me that, and I say a policy, and you say, oh, no, not that policy, and then I'll tell you about another policy.
Go on, then tell us another one.
Well, I wanted to finish what I was saying about Great British Energy. That's going to cut people's bills because we'll be domestically producing our green energy, protects our kids' futures, creates hundreds of thousands of jobs in this country, but most importantly for most people right now listening to this, it's going to cut their bills. And the point about that is, right, sure, it's not... it's not controversial, it's not kind of Boris Johnson attention-seeking. That's not what people want. They're looking at Keir Starmer and they're thinking, that's exactly the kind of Prime Minister that this country needs right now.
Don't people want cheap energy? Don't people want fracking? Don't people want other sources of energy, nuclear power?
Fracking wouldn't make our energy cheaper because it would be gas sold on international markets. We wouldn't have any control over the price.
That is a whole nother debate.
It really is.
Richard, Jonathan, thank you both so much. It's been great to sort of tease out the details of when that election might be and what pitch both parties are going to make to the public.